What would you do if you saw two little girls being told to lick the floor in a luxury store just because they were poor? Would you walk away, or would you stand up for them? This is the story of a single mother, her two daughters, and a moment that exposed the difference between wealth and worth, and by the end, it's also the story of a billionaire who remembered what kindness really means. The morning light streamed through the golden glass doors of Maison Arlette, a place where everything sparkled, from the polished marble floors to the price tags that could buy someone's rent for a year. Every shoe gleamed under perfect lighting, every perfume bottle reflected ambition, and every whisper carried the weight of superiority. Among the endless rows of velvet displays, two little girls sat quietly in a corner, Anna and Sophie. Their pale pink blouses and neat gray skirts looked out of place in this temple of luxury. Their mother, Claire, worked here as a sales assistant. It wasn't her dream job, but it was her lifeline, the last thing keeping food on their table after her husband's tragic construction accident 2 years earlier. That morning, Claire had begged her manager, Miss Turner, for permission to bring the girls for just an hour. Their babysitter had fallen sick, and she couldn't afford to skip another shift. Turner had allowed it, but with a warning that hung in the air like a storm cloud: keep them invisible. For a while, everything went fine. The girls sat cross-legged, whispering softly, coloring in a small notebook. Then, as a wealthy customer walked by, his muddy shoe brushed the corner of the carpet near them, leaving a faint brown smear on the polished tile. That was all it took. Miss Turner's sharp heels clicked toward them like daggers. Her cold, gray eyes narrowed as she pointed at the floor. Who did this? She snapped. Anna froze, terrified. Sophie's lower lip trembled. We didn't. Don't you dare lie to me, Turner hissed. I saw you playing around here. Do you know how much this floor costs to clean? Claire rushed forward, her hands trembling. Miss Turner, please, it wasn't them. A customer, enough. Turner's voice sliced through her plea like glass. You bring your children into my store, and now you're making excuses for them? This is what happens when people like you think they belong here. The words "people like you" hung heavy in the air. Claire's face went pale. Anna's eyes filled with tears. Sophie clutched her mother's hand, too young to understand, too scared to speak. Miss Turner smirked. If you made it dirty, clean it. Use your tongue if you have to. Maybe then you'll learn to respect luxury. The store went silent. Even the soft music seemed to vanish. Anna gasped. Sophie began to sob, the kind of deep, shaking cry that breaks hearts. Claire dropped to her knees. Please, Miss Turner, she whispered, tears spilling freely. They're just children. I'll clean it myself. Then do it, Turner snapped. Now. No one moved. The other employees stood frozen, horrified but too afraid to intervene. To them, Miss Turner was power. To Claire, she was survival. And to the two little girls, she was cruelty in its purest form. And then, suddenly, from the far end of the store came the sound of footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Calm. Every head turned. A tall man in a navy blue suit walked forward, his expression unreadable. The staff recognized him but never expected him to show up unannounced. He was Adrian Cole, the silent investor, the man who quietly owned every branch of Maison Arlette. He had been walking the floor incognito that day, observing how his employees treated customers and each other. What he found instead was a moment that would test the soul of his company. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes sweeping over the scene: the crying children, the kneeling mother, and the manager standing tall in her cruelty. His jaw tightened. Miss Turner, he said softly. Did I just hear you tell a child to clean the floor with her tongue? The room froze. Turner stammered. Sir, it's not what it looked like. Enough. His voice was low, calm, but it carried more weight than a shout. You will stop speaking now. He turned toward Claire and the girls, his expression softening. Ma'am, please stand. You don't have to kneel in my store. Claire hesitated, tears still streaking her face, then slowly rose to her feet. Her daughters clung to her sides like fragile petals. Adrian took a deep breath, turning back to Miss Turner. You've humiliated a mother in front of her children. You've forgotten that luxury means nothing when it costs someone their dignity. Then, in a moment that silenced the entire boutique, Adrian knelt beside the girls. He took out his silk handkerchief and gently wiped Sophie's tears. You did nothing wrong, he said quietly. And no one will ever speak to you that way again. Sophie sniffled, her voice trembling. Are you mad at us? Adrian smiled faintly. No, sweetheart. I'm mad at the world for forgetting kindness. He stood, picked up the soiled shoe, and walked toward the counter. Everyone watched as he dropped it there and said, no shoe, no matter how expensive, is worth more than a child's tears. The room remained silent. Miss Turner, he said evenly. You are relieved of your duties. Effective immediately. No one clapped. No one spoke. But every person in that store knew they had just witnessed something they would never forget, and as Miss Turner was escorted out, the quiet hum of humanity returned to Maison Arlette, not through wealth, but through compassion. In the days that followed, whispers spread like wildfire through the company. The story of what had happened, of the manager's cruelty, of the billionaire's quiet fury, traveled faster than gossip ever could have. For Claire, the aftermath felt unreal. She kept expecting to wake up from a dream. But when Adrian personally called her into his office a few days later, reality became even more unbelievable. He listened as she told her story, not the edited version she gave the world, but the truth. About her husband's death, the unpaid bills, the nights she skipped dinner so her girls could eat, the constant fear of losing everything. When she finished, Adrian was silent. Then he said softly, no one who works this hard to raise two kind children should ever feel powerless. He offered her a new position, assistant store manager, full benefits, full salary, and flexible hours so she could care for her daughters. Claire broke down in tears, unable to speak. Adrian smiled gently. Don't thank me. Just promise you'll raise them to be kind even when the world isn't. And she did. The change was immediate. The store, once ruled by fear, became a sanctuary of empathy. Adrian implemented new training, not just for sales skills, but for humanity, teaching his staff that respect is the true currency of luxury. Customers noticed. Word spread. Maison Arlette became known not just for its fashion, but for its heart. At the front counter, framed in gold, hung a simple quote written in Adrian's own handwriting: luxury is meaningless without kindness. Years later, Anna and Sophie would grow up to tell that story, not as a tale of humiliation, but as a lesson in courage, compassion, and the power of standing up for what's right. And sometimes, when Claire passed that golden frame, she'd whisper to herself, we survived the cruelty. But more than that, we reminded the world to be kind. Because one act of compassion, one moment of courage, can change not just a life, but an entire legacy. If this story moved you, if you believe that dignity matters more than status, share it. Because sometimes, standing up for kindness is the most powerful thing any of us can do.